Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this installment of Boyce Thompson Institute's Breaking Ground discussion series. My name is AJ Bushy. I'm here in the Communications Department at BTI. And for this month's Breaking Ground, we welcome Sheila Ochugboju, Executive Director of Alliance for Science. Hi, Sheila. She's with the Alliance for Science, a global science communications initiative housed here at BTI in Ithaca, New York. And today we'll be talking about the Alliance's new vision for the Global South, which can be summed up with the phrase, relief to resilience. To start out, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you ended up here at BTI.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this series, which I've been watching since I got to know about BTI, and it's fascinating. So I'm so happy to be amongst the community that gets to share on this particular discussion series. I'm happy to be in Ithaca, even though it has been snowing, which is a little bit of a shock to my system. But I'm getting used to it. I did prepare my mind for life in Ithaca, so I'm very excited. Let me share a little bit about myself. I'm going to share screen because we are in comms. Images tell stories.
It's true.
So I have some pictures here that tell you about my journey to Ithaca. And of course, I fell in love with BTI in Ithaca just from the name Ithaca, because I'm a student of Greek myths. So Ithaca, Odysseus's journey home, has always been one of my favorite stories. It's an image of everybody's journey to find themselves inwards and outwards. And in some ways, my journey to this role, I feel like I fully manifested this role, and I gathered together so many parts of my journey, personal and professional, in this particular role. And so I want to share a little bit about it and acknowledge everything that has gotten me to this place where I'm very privileged to be. I want to start with the picture on the top right with the arrow pointing at my mother. So my mother, who is 80 now, she was 80 this year, was born in a small town village in Nigeria, Ogoja, and sadly she was orphaned at an early age. She and her brothers were separated, and she grew up in a convent school. And so many of us from our region were educated by the Catholic missionaries. So that's her in school, and education was our pathway out of everything. So my mother studied really hard, was very brilliant, won a number of scholarships. The most important one in terms of transformation for my family was a British Council scholarship to go to the UK to study education. It was very prestigious at that time. It was a national thing, and it was the highest score. And it was unusual for a woman to get the highest score. And she got the highest score and fought to, because even though she was the woman with the highest score, they still wanted to choose the second person, who was a man, because they were like, why educate a woman? It was the late 60s. They could not see the point of investing in a woman. And so my mother went to the UK to study. And so I get my love of education and my understanding that education is a way out of everything for many people from poor communities in the global South. So that's a picture of me there. That was my first school picture when I got to the UK at age 9 with my funny hairstyle, which I thought I looked great at the time. I was 9 years old. I came to London from a small village in Nigeria to go to primary school, finished primary school, secondary school, ended up studying science, became a biochemist. And that grew out of my love of nature, growing up close to nature in Nigeria. And the picture at the bottom right here, you see me, that was me in Oxford at the Institute of Virology and Environmental Microbiology, where that was during my postdoc, where I was doing a fellowship, Daphne Jackson Fellowship, and that was to promote women in science. So I was doing, at that time, quite controversial work, baculovirus expression systems, looking at genetically modified organisms for biological pesticides. And at that time, this is 98 to 2000, so before the genome had really been decoded. So genetic engineering was still, to some people, they thought it wasn't really going to happen. We didn't know we would be where we are now at that side of the century. So that's how my journey so I was a bench scientist, like many scientists here in BTI, but because of the controversies on our work, we were given an opportunity to study comms so that we could communicate, so that people could see we were real people doing work, hope for mankind, that they wouldn't think we were just evil scientists. So that's how I learned my comms. It was really hands-on. And so that's the story of me as a scientist. On the top of that picture is a picture of my late dad. My dad was a doctor. He also, education was his pathway out. So he had actually studied in Nigeria and was a forester. So he was risen up the civil service and used to take care of the forest. So that was his training. He was a scientist in that way. But then he got a scholarship in the Soviet Union scholarship to study medicine, went to University of Kharkov at that time, now Kharkiv, and studied medicine, became a surgeon. So medicine, science, and all of that was important to my family. My family understood that science gave you more choices and encouraged me to do that. And so the bottom here is how my family grew. So you'll see my 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, my mother there, who's 80, and my son-in-law, Ben, who is the proud daddy of my granddaughter, who's just 2 months old now. So wow. I was there for her birth on the 4th of October this year. Really happy. That's my firstborn there. So now we are 4 generations of firstborn women. It really, it's like magical to me to say it. But the picture in the middle there, where you see that picture that says the GM expert, it was in Good Housekeeping magazine in 2003. So I had just left Oxford. My children were all young. I was now working for the science minister at the time. We were trying to do role modeling to get more women and girls into science. And so they were profiling women who they said were shaping the future, but, really to showcase role models in science. And so that picture was of my 4 children. My daughter here, who is now 29, that was her in the corner there next to the dinosaur. This is the Natural History Museum in London. She was just 10 years old. But the story I want to tell about that picture is, first they called me, GM expert. Yes, but what I found difficult at that time to imbibe was women shaping the future, because I was a young mom, lots of kids, trying to drop kids off, then try to work. You just feel like you're coping. So I was like, I don't think I'm shaping any future. I can barely keep my kitchen in order. I don't know how anybody thinks I'm shaping the future. but my husband at the time said, you know what? They're looking at who you could be. It's not who you are, it's who you could be. And I held on to that. And I'm so grateful, because now here I am, 2022, and I feel that I have become that person who was like prophesied in 2003. So that's a little bit about me and my journey to ITHACA, and I'm super glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're really glad you're here. And I'll point out to everyone at home or wherever you're watching that only got you up to 2003. You've done a lot of amazing things between then and now as well, right? You've done things, in a whole nother science communications and policy type.
Yes. Yes. So once I left the lab in Oxford, I went into development work. I really wanted. The comms had made me realize we needed to do much more work to connect to communities and to know what the science is for. So I ended up working in the development sphere. And since then, I've worked for lots of UN agencies. I worked for UN Environment Program, so did quite a bit of work on climate change issues, deforestation, UN Red Plus, working at restoration issues, network of African women environmentalists. And then the role I had before coming here was working for Africa CDC. And that was really, it was really humbling. It was the first time that, because we were in a pandemic, suddenly everybody realized communication is everything. And good science communication could literally save lives. So my role as head of strategic comms at Africa CDC was to communicate that the vaccines were coming, talk about the vaccines, encourage people to get the vaccines across Africa, look at vaccine hesitancy, look at rollout issues. So it was a mixture of science comm, but also crisis communications. You know, it was all very fast-paced, different languages, different cultures, different contexts, different reasons why people did or did not take the vaccine. So that was the work I did before I came to AFS. So when the role for AFS, Alliance for Science, came up, I imagined what it would be like, and I thought, wow, here is a role that brings me back to core elements of myself. The academic part of myself, the part that likes to be within a research community, the part that likes to do communications, and the part that wants to be embedded in development work and show the relevant for health, environment, society, etc. So the role really, that's why I feel I manifested it. It just gave me an opportunity to just grow in everything I'm passionate about. Thank you.
It seems perfect for you. It really is. It's, you know, we're so lucky to have you. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Alliance for Science and your vision and you know, this new concept that you've come up with?
Yeah, so the Alliance for Science was founded in 2014, and it was founded by visionary science communicator, Dr. Sarah Evanja. And she worked here in Cornell, and she understood that we needed a pro-science voice. There are a lot of, especially with frontier technologies and the kind of cutting edge agricultural biotech work that is being done here at BTI and on the Cornell campus, you needed to give a space for pro-science voices to speak so that the hard work the researchers are doing can bear fruit to communities, so that they can be uptake, there won't be resistance, and there'll be policies that allows the fruits of that research to show up in communities. So AFS was founded as a global communications initiative to counter a lot of the misinformation about agricultural biotechnology, climate change, nuclear power, vaccines, and just contemporary science issues. And so it's very successful at doing so. If you Google if you Google gene editing or we will come up top. Almost any we will be the first in your search engine. So we've done very well in becoming a trusted voice for frontier tech in plant sciences, agricultural sciences. But since I joined, I was actually recruited on the basis of an expanding mandate. And in order to get a mandate that the team we have, the wonderful team I inherited is a globally dispersed team. So Sarah, Dr. Evanja, had managed to grow an organization that was very committed to a vision of creating space for science, but very dispersed globally, because it's a global science initiative. So working across Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Latin America, Southeast Asia, lots of global fellows who had come, been trained, gone back, set up initiatives across all those continents. And we're very busy doing that work. So when I came just when the pandemic was ending. So a number of our team members had been recruited and were working, but really hadn't met, really hadn't, the team was becoming very disparate because of the 2 years of the pandemic. So we came together, we went on a retreat in Kenya, and we looked at what could our expanded mandate look like? How can we bring together all the core things that we do well, and how can we make a new offer that is holistic, that is that brings more people into the conversation about what agricultural biotech can do for you. So we came up with a new vision. Our mission is largely the same, but the vision is somewhat expanded, and I'll read it out and explain bits of it because it's the nuance is important. So the Alliance for Science seeks a future where science and innovation is shared and supported, to bring about a world without poverty, where people everywhere flourish on an ecologically protected and restored planet. Now, keywords that are important is about shared and supported. So often, especially in the global South, innovations and science are seen as being foisted on communities, and that's where the resistance comes. It's not being shared in that it's not a co-creation process, and scientists on the continent are generally not the ones defining their research parameters, and they're not the ones doing it. So Alliance for Science really is invested in supporting scientists in Asia, Latin America, and Africa to do the work, to have the training, to do the gene editing and the GMO work, to answer the questions that they're asking, to bring about the changes that they want. So that's where the shared and support is important. And of course, what is our ultimate objective? A world without poverty. That's what, when we look at the SDGs, and there's 17 of them, to me, where do we want to get to? We want to get to a world without poverty where we leave no one behind. That's what all of them, if you add them up together, should get us to. But also recognizing that if we do our science well, we should be protecting our ecosystems and we should be restoring our planet. So that's fundamental in our vision of the world of what science can do. So we still do the same thing: advocacy, communications, research, and all of it to create an enabling environment for scientists and science-based solutions to global challenges. So thanks.
Yeah, and I think that ties in when you know, the way you describe the shared and supported, and having people in the global South create their own solutions.
Yeah,
that's so important, and that seems to tie nicely with the from relief to resilience aspect, it seems.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, so a lot of the resistance to some of the technologies, GMOs, GE, has been that when the applications of it are seen in the global North, they're generally for problems which are like first world problems, like, you know, how do you have nice tomatoes on the shelf? How do you know, so they're really neat looking, how transportation so they don't get damaged. Whereas in the global South, where farmers are looking for solutions for pests, they're looking for drought resistance, they're looking for things that can increase yields and protect them and give them nutrient density. So, but because researchers didn't have access to the technology, so researchers were not doing it on the continent, they kind of thought, well, all of this technology is irrelevant to us. But now you're seeing science, world-class labs in places like IITA in Kenya, International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, who have labs like Lina Tripathi lab doing work on all the virus work there, and also in Nigeria, looking at pest resistance to cassava, to bananas, all the staple crops, solving one or two problems that yield huge benefits and transform lives almost immediately. So we launched the Global South Hub at the end of August, at the end of our retreat. And it's really to bring about a vision of a shared shared dynamics across poorer countries. So countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America have shared problems. Rural farmers, low yields, gender inequality, all of that. And so when we're working in Bangladesh and in Nigeria, say with Muslim communities and trying to create a science enabling environment, we're finding solutions in each of those places, but thus far, those solutions have remained in those places. So by building a central Global South hub for Alliance for Science, we can do more South-South collaboration. We can learn from ourselves, and we can then offer it to the wider world. So the Global South hub launch happened in August. It's been very, very warmly received. And we've already begun to collaborate across Latin America, Africa, Asia, Africa. It's been really nice. So it's amazing how just a shift like that can change how you work internally. And we brought about also a new strategy of relief to resilience. Because generally when we're talking about, when people in the global north look at the global south, it's usually a campaign because there's a famine or there's a disaster. And so they're always looking at the global south as vulnerable and fragile, and there are fragilities and they do keep on recurring. But science does have solutions to those recurrent fragilities. So drought-resistant seeds and all of those things, we can begin to say, let's start investing in the technologies and the science that can shift us from a place where every year there's a relief campaign. Let's move to resilience. Let's start a campaign for investing in resilience, the science that builds resilience, and ask communities to look at where the science sits within their own cultural context. So that's how we started the Relief to Resilience campaign.
I love that. That's so important to just, it seems like such common sense. It's like people who live in a place, wherever it is, they're going to know what they need better than someone from outside just saying,
Yeah.
you know, oh, you had a big flood, here's some rice or something. It's such common sense to me. So it's really nice that this is starting to happen more and more.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we have some examples to talk about. Do you have I know we have a few. What is there a first one you'd like to talk about?
Yes, I mean, we have been supporting Nigeria and Ghana. So for Life for Science, we have 4 teams: policy, research, communications, and training, and all of them work together. For the policy team, we work with the National Biosafety Agencies in the country to bring it to look at do you have a robust regulatory regime for these technologies to come out? Because we want to maintain trust in the science, and we want when the technology comes out for people to trust it. So we did a lot of work supporting the national biotechnology agencies in Nigeria and Ghana, who went through their normal regulatory processes to bring about BT Cowpea, for instance. And BT Cowpea is really important. BT Cowpea, so cowpeas, as you know, are the beans, and they're a staple across Africa, across sub-Saharan Africa, but they're a huge staple in terms of what people eat every day in Nigeria and Ghana. And usually what happens is up to 80% of these beans are lost due to pest infestation. So there's a pod borer, the biological term is Maruca vitrata, and it's responsible for 80% of yield losses. Now, for those of us that went to school in Nigeria, anybody that went to boarding school, you were used to to eating the beans and seeing the insects because it was just almost impossible not to have an infested crop. And there was a joke when we were growing up, and they said, just eat the protein as well. They're not going to kill you. It used to be like that. But for farmers, it's absolutely horrible. And it's because it devastates yields. So Nigeria imports up to 20% of its cowpea because of the losses that are made, and this is
Wow.
billions of dollars that are wasted due to post-harvest losses. But also, farmers work really hard to try to keep their harvest, so they spray the crop, and the crop that is not BT cowpea, they can spray 8 to 12 times in a season. And you can imagine, in a hot country, they're not wearing protective gear, they're spraying. So there's health damage, health effects to the farmer, there's environmental impacts. So the fact that commercialization of BT cowpea has come up in Nigeria and Ghana has effects for the health of the farmer and of the environment. And also just nutrient density is an important source of protein, vitamins, and minerals like iron and thiamine. And this is hugely important. Iron, very important in Nigeria, where you have a lot of us who suffer from not thalassemia. Gosh, I've forgotten what I was going to say, but I'll come back to it.
Sickle cell anemia? Iron deficiency?
I've forgotten the name. Anyway, don't worry. But iron is very, very important. And our scientists have our scientists in Nigeria, in Agricultural Research Institute and Ahmadu Bello University, one of our oldest universities in Nigeria, ABU, were involved in developing BT cowpea. So yeah, so we're very proud that this commercialization it was approved in 2019 in Nigeria and now in Ghana. And we're also very proud that countries like Kenya are lifting the ban on GMOs. And so staples like BT maize are soon be commercialized. So we see that food security will soon be enhanced by these technologies. And it's really important, especially now with the impact of the Ukraine war, low fertilizer inputs now. So yields are down anyway because farmers don't have fertilizer. Not to talk of climate change and all the other issues. So we're still working to keep an enabling environment, because once you have an approval of a technology like this, there's a backlash that comes immediately. The misinformation grows. So there's an intensification of an anti-science message. So we can't rest on our laurels in any way. We have to keep on making the case that there is a direct improvement in farmers' lives, in environmental impact, and in health.
And are you seeing that backlash?
Yes, we saw it immediately. In Nigeria, it was hard fought because as soon as it was approved, a group took the government to court, and our policy team helped to prepare the case for the government and helped the scientists to put the data together to counter some of the misinformation around, oh, it causes cancer, oh, it damages the environment. So mobilize scientists who generally just do their science and go home and just try not to get involved in controversies. But so just getting scientists even to put public comments in to say, this is a good thing, it will help. Usually scientists can't be bothered to do that, but we mobilize scientists to put public comments in. So when they asked for, they looked at the comments, there was only one negative comment, and the others were very clear, positive comments with hard data in Ghana. So the approval went through very smoothly. So we continue to work hard around that.
That's great. That's a huge success. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned cassava earlier, which I know is really important. Africa, South America, parts of Asia as well. And
yes, cassava is so important. It's funny because cassava is not an indigenous crop to West Africa. It came from Latin America. But in a country like Nigeria, every single family eats some kind of cassava-based food every day. Like it's such a staple because we have so many ways of doing it. We eat the leaves, we eat it in our staple called gari with eba, which is like a dumpling, lots of different ways of making it. So it's a staple for about 1 billion people around the world, across sub-Saharan Africa. But there is a disease called cassava mosaic virus that is spreading across Africa. I think it's been spreading across the continent for a number of years, and it's really devastating. It can reduce yields by up to 90%. And so there's been a lot of investment made in research for resistant strains over the last 30 years. And we see one of the standout projects that the leadership was here in Cornell is Next Gen Cassava, has a team of world-class scientists around the world. Just, I wanted to tell the story about, I call them the virus hunters. They've been trying to fight this virus as it makes its way across the continent. And the last stop in the West is like Nigeria. If it hits Nigeria, we are really done in terms of, food security. So they've been working very hard for the last 30 years. But researchers in Uganda, in the National Crops Resources Research Institute in Switzerland, they found a gene called the cassava mosaic disease 2CMD2 that provides resistance to disease. So plant breeders have been using the gene as a marker to guide conventional breeding of new resistant varieties. But as we all know, this is a slow process. It takes years, and we know we don't have years. But thankfully, we have new technologies such as CRISPR, gene editing, that is giving us a chance to get ahead of the game, to look for resistance, to get ahead of the spread of this virus, because it mutates as well. And it doesn't just affect the leaves, it also affects the roots as well. So sometimes a farmer thinks he's got a great crop and then he harvests and realizes it's devastating. Sometimes can't see that they've lost most of their yield. So we want to keep on telling the story of what these extraordinary scientists are doing quietly in their labs, but they literally will save lives of children in the future.
Yeah, I love this story too, because it if I recall, the gene, it started with the farmers. Farmers said, hey, these are resistant. They found some individual cassava plants that were resistant, and it went from there. And it's the African researchers and scientists who are doing the work and continuing it going. These days, this concept of parachute science, of the researchers coming in from the US or Europe or, in China increasingly, and getting these samples and then going home and doing all the work and saying, hey, we discovered this thing. It's like, well, where'd that knowledge come from? That came from Africa or Brazil or wherever. So I love the story that it's, the people who have the knowledge are getting the credit as well. So I really enjoy the story. So it's been about a half hour. How about we check some questions? Looks like we have a few questions in the chat box, and if anyone else has questions, please feel free to put them in there now. We have one from Matthew Willman. Based on your mission and vision update, is the Alliance looking to expand the areas of its work beyond plant biotechnology? That's a good question.
Oh, yes. I should have said that. Yes, we have actually 4 areas. So, plant biotechnology is important, of course, in climate change, which is one of our core areas we're working in. But we're also looking at global health. So we're looking at vaccines, we're looking at health misinformation and anything around science communication that helps shift behavioral change when it comes to health. And that's very important in the global South. And also it's important in terms of us learning lessons from what happened during the pandemic so that we can be better prepared for future outbreaks. We won't be caught off guard. We can have trusted messengers in place. We can have trusted mechanisms to reach hard to reach communities with clear science information. And we have been doing some work in synthetic biology, supporting, we had a group of scientists that came and policymakers that came from Colombia who are interested in synthetic biology and looking at the policies, looking at the application and looking, so future of foods as well as future of many other things. So drugs, diagnostics, all those things. So we are an alliance for science. So we're expanding our focus areas across all of those things. We're of course starting with biotech and plant biotech because that's our core competency. But as the team expands, and it is expanding, and we get more of our team that can offer more support across the spectrum, it will, and also we build partnerships with other agencies. We'll be able to talk much more broadly about other science issues across our focus areas of climate change, food and nutrition security, global health, and misinformation, which is a cross-cutter.
That's fantastic. Another question from Joseph Gakpo.
Yes.
Beyond the scientists you work with, what role are farmers playing in your communication activities at the Alliance for Science on technologies like GMOs?
And the thing is, farmers, well, I love working with farmers. Farmers are so solution orientated. They're so clear on what the goal is. Our goal is to get higher yields, to make a profit, and to get, to support our communities and help our families. It's really clear. What can you do to help us? What does the science say? So we work with farmers very closely to learn from them. We have a very strong farmers who are advocates for the technologies for GMOs, especially in Kenya. We have one farmer there who's part of our Global Fellows Network who mobilized farmers to actually petition the government before they lifted the GMO bans to say, we need solutions. You're not giving us any solutions, and there are scientific solutions and we want access to them. So we work with farmers in that way, and they help us with demonstration farms so that we can show the media that when you grow a crop using these technologies, it doesn't devastate. They say, oh, it kills off every other thing. You don't get bees, you don't get ants, So you just have to have a demonstration farm. So you can see it hasn't done that. You can see all the ants, you can see everything here. The biodiversity is not destroyed by this. So they help us in that way. But they also help in some of the science models. I think some of the scientists will know there's a model called Triad, which is, I think it was started here somewhere in Cornell, where the experimenting on different hybrid varieties, you involve the farmers in actually testing it within their own context, so that the data that they get is much richer. So you have three varieties, and one of them, you give the farmer 3 varieties and he tests it there, and you put that data into your database and you analyze it. Yep. So trying to find models where you involve the farmers in the science itself, that's increasing. And we want to encourage that and showcase how that really gets us to better answers faster.
That's a great idea. Yeah. One from Kelly White. Hi, Kelly. What can lay people who are not scientists or farmers do to support your mission and work?
Wow, thank you. Well, first of all, you can follow us and learn more about our work. We're Sciencecom, so the more followers and advocates we have, the better it is for us, so that we know we're not alone, we're not in our echo chamber. You can help us do better by telling us what's working well where you are, what's not working well, and we will listen. You can donate to some of our work, and specifically donate to our fellows, who are the young people or communicators. Some of them are farmers, some of them are community activists who are working within their own context. You can sponsor some of their role modeling work or education work in different contexts. So there are many ways in which you can be part of this. And when we want pro-science voices to speak up and tell us the facts, we don't want to be the ones just saying it so that we don't look like a propaganda machine. You speak up, you say, actually, I'm a scientist and I work in this and I can tell you this is true. And the more and more scientists do that and become more vocal, the better it'll be for all of science. So you can do that. Thank you.
It's great advice. Great advice for everyone. We have Dennis, who is a junior biotechnologist with a strong desire in promoting the livelihood. And it sounds like he's in Kenya. And what can the Alliance for Science do to such junior biotechs to help out in the less advantaged regions like Kenya?
Oh, wow. Get in touch with us. Because actually the Education and Outreach Department here at BTI have a wonderful project that they work with one of our global fellows in a project called Sci-Fun. It's Mr. Science and Fun. He makes science fun. So he has been teaching biotech from primary to tertiary level. So he does short courses, demonstration classes, and all of it is to show that you can teach biotech at every level. It's not, he wants it actually to put in the curriculum so that people begin to see a subject called biotechnology. And so you can help by getting in touch and being a role model to show what does a career in biotech look like? What do biotechnologies look like? So that you can be an inspiration for other young people to study this and move forward. So yeah. Get in touch and we can plug you in for sure in our work. And you'll see it. It's an upcoming campaign. It's going to be big next year. We're going to just showcase biotech from all around the world to hopefully inspire young people.
And I just put my email address in the chat. So if anyone can email me anything, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Anytime. Oh, another one from Joseph. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of optimism that the pandemic and vaccines will make the public have more trust in science. Do you think that has been the case over the last 2 years? That's a great question.
Well, it may look like it hasn't been, but if you look at the numbers, it has been. If you look at the numbers of people that took the vaccines, it actually has been. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you listen to the noise of the conspiracy theorists and online, you would think nobody was taking the vaccine, but actually most people are, because you're getting on flights, you have to have the vaccine. People took the vaccine. So much as there's a lot of misinformation out there, there is a lot of trust in science. And the data shows that trust in science actually has grown, and it grew during the time of the pandemic. If you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't even think we'd get a vaccine. We were like, it takes 15 years, just don't know how this is going to end, but it's not going to be with a vaccine. And then very quickly, we saw heroic scientists, historic levels of collaboration across the world. So yes, I believe trust in science has grown. And I was in Kenya at some point during the lockdown, and people knew the difference between the vaccines. Never in my life have I known people to know. They'll say, yes, well, I took the AstraZeneca. No, I took this one. And they knew why they were making choices. Which other vaccine have you ever understood the mechanism of? This is the first time lay people have understood mechanisms of vaccine and made choices. So yeah, I think it's grown. That's wonderful. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it like that. I guess I'm just so, at least in the US here, there's just so much noise of the conspiracy theorists and things. Yeah, I love that positive view. That helps. I don't see any other questions. We still have some time left. If folks have more questions, please pop them in the chat box. In the meantime, should we talk about eggplant or brinjal? I know there's one other cool example of a GMO crop in the global south. Yes. So yeah, BT Brinjal is important. And we want to talk about it because we have a sister organization, part of Alliance for Science, called Farming Future Bangladesh. who do a lot of work in Bangladesh in science communication and are very successful in doing so, and have really created an enabling environment for BT eggplant to be accepted in Bangladesh. And it's a staple crop. It's also devastated by a borer that reduces yields by up to 80%. And farmers have been using pesticides to control this, and they can actually apply pesticides up to between 23 to 140 times per season. Can you imagine that? So you're basically eating toxic vegetables by the time you get that eggplant. So it's terrible. So BT Brinjal, the BT eggplant, has reduced pesticide uses by about 70%. It's reduced the applications, it's increased the yields by up to about 50%. And so the crop is less toxic, and also there's more money in the pocket of farmers because they're not having to spray so much, and they don't have to spend so much time on the farm. So in terms of labor, the amount of days that they actually spend outside in the farm is reduced by about 250 to 278 days in a year. That's a lot of time to now spend at home with your family and just bond rather than just being out in the fields,
That's a whole month almost.
You know what I mean? So it is very hard to farm in the global south without the technologies, without the high-end inputs. It's just back-breaking work for very low rewards. But it's also really nice that the original genetic engineering was done by an Indian company, a company called Maiko. And also the Bangladesh Agricultural Research Institute. They introgressed the gene into 9 different farmer preferred varieties. So Cornell University has been involved in the field trials with funding from USAID. We've been involved in developing strategies around buy-in at the end of the research. So we generally, as Alliance for Science, work with a research community that is taking time to develop a particular crop. And so we begin near the end point of it to look at the policy and regulatory framework and the enabling environment for how now the buy-in or the uptake on the other end. So that's how we've been partnering with research teams, research colleagues here in Cornell University. And Arif, who is our team leader in Bangladesh, has been working very closely with Cornell University on BT eggplant.
That's great.
Yeah.
And this picture here with a little girl also reminds me that a lot of these farmers in the global south, they're really kind of small subsistence farmers, right? And their family,
that's it.
Little place, kids are running around in the field, playing in the fields, and so it's not just the farmer, him or herself, who's being exposed to all these toxins. It's everybody.
It's actually true, because that's one of my earliest memories as well. When I was growing up in Nigeria, and I must have been like 6 or 7, and I would go with, it was my aunt, and we would walk to the farm, and she would be farming her little plot. I'd be running around, playing, going to the stream, doing all kinds of things, not really thinking about anything. I don't know what residues they were. I don't know my biggest worry was snakes, the rest. I didn't think about any other thing. Yeah, it's true. And even with all of that, farmers are not able to feed their families. With all of that intensity and labor intensity, they can't feed their family. And often it's a woman, often it's not a man. It's a woman carrying her child. 80% of the agricultural work is actually done by women in the global south.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I don't know that.
Yeah. So when you are improving agricultural value chains, you're also improving gender equality and empowering households much more, because it's generally women at the center of those agricultural value chains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are fantastic tools.
Yeah.
So we have a question from David Silberman, a BTI alum. Hi, David.
Hi.
Good to see you again. What advice can you give to a BTI alum who for 10 years has tried in vain to convince a Thanksgiving dinner table full of non-science PhDs, political science, art, history, education, psychology, who refuse to believe that GMO technology is both practical and useful? Last year, I was banished from the table. Not really, but the discussion was ended.
Well, I think GMOs have polarized many discussions, many communities, because of the idea of a foreign gene enters into a species, it wouldn't have done so naturally, the idea of it's not natural. So we look at that head on and say, actually, it's become easier to have a conversation now with gene editing, because with gene editing, you're working within the genome. So you're using tools to speed up what you would normally do with conventional plant breeding. But you're not introducing foreign DNA, but it's very close. It's within the spectrum of genetic technologies. So perhaps you start the conversation on gene editing. What is it that you're opposed to? Is it that there's foreign DNA? Okay, you could do what is it we're trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve either pest resistance or increased yields or many things, but we're trying to speed up the rate of discovery, and we're trying to use the tools that we have to do that. So once we start the conversation around what is all this for, it is to enhance resistance to pest or to enhance productivity and yield. Start with the what is it for? What is it that we need to achieve? Food security. What's the real problem? What tools do we have? So if you're saying you're anti-GMO, tell me what are the tools you have for poor communities and poor farmers to deal with these in a way that can change their lives within their lifetime. Tell me what those tools are. And generally you'll find other people will not have an alternative. It's very easy to say no, but if you're not able to offer an alternative, then you're not really having a conversation. Then you say, well, there are tools that agricultural biotechnology offers. There's some solutions to solve the problem of pest resistance. And this is the problem that farmers have. And these are some of the solutions that sit within a number of tools. If they want to use them, they use them. If they don't want to use them, then they don't. But also to remember that these technologies, we learned it. This is not something somebody magically thought about, scientists magically thought about in a lab. This is observational science, and then genetic technologies tools were used to apply to make it faster and better and more precise. So the mechanisms are natural. The tools that we're using are enhancing natural, as we do in many other things. And also then ask the same person, did you take the vaccine? All the vaccines you've taken in your life, look at how many genetically modified things that enter your body. So I don't understand, if you're resistant to it, there's a lot of things you have to cut out of your everyday life, especially if you're living here in America.
Yes. From medicines to even
Yeah.
cheese. I mean, I think I read like 70 or 80% of cheese in the US is made with genetically modified enzymes instead of, we're not still using rennet from cow stomachs, we're making the enzymes and instead of doing it that way. But I love what you said about you starting with a common ground. Like, what's our ultimate goal? Let's agree on that. We want to feed more people by spraying less nasty stuff in the environment, and make everything more sustainable for human health, for the environmental health, and go from there. Start with a common ground, and then try.
So I remember, I was trying to remember something. So sickle cell trait, I wanted to make the point about sickle cell trait. So sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease is very prevalent in West Africa. More than 50–60% of us have the trait, not necessarily the disease, but it's still devastating. And so this is another opportunity to use genetic technologies to support those that are suffering from sickle cell disease, which is largely a African and a West African disease. And so what usually happens is, if you have sickle cell disease, your blood cells are in a sickle shape, so you can't take up as much iron and oxygen, so you end up very iron deficient. So you need a meal that is very rich in iron. So I suffer from it, my children suffer from it. It's very difficult for us for our blood cells to take up iron because of our sickle cell trait. So you do need foods that have enriched iron in them for many West African peoples. So it's not a small thing. And we're looking forward to these frontier technologies bringing about precision medical applications that can really support these genetic diseases, inherited diseases that are prevalently African.
Great point. It's not just food. There's all kinds of applications for the biotech. Okay, one last quick question. Hopefully we can make that. We're almost out of time. Final question from Joseph. You have "Hope is greater than fear" in your background. What is the Alliance seeking to communicate with this motto?
Yes, hope is greater than fear. Fear is somewhat seductive, and that's what misinformation does. You can galvanize people around fear, but that can only last for a certain amount of time. We can't stay afraid forever. And we saw that with the pandemic. We needed to have hope. The vaccines gave us hope. And much as people were still very afraid of these new mRNA technologies, they still had a hope of a better future, a hope of living a normal life again. And so that hope actually helped people to overcome the fear of these new technologies, and they took the vaccine, and so we see that all the time. When you look at what is the hope of this technology and what are our fears, hope will always outweigh fear. Fear may take a grip, but it can never stay long. We are, as human beings, just not engineered to hold on to fear for too long. It's toxic to our body, but hope can keep us going for decades, for centuries. A whole lifetime can be driven by hope.
I love that. That's a good place to end. Our whole lifetime can be driven by hope. Absolutely love that. Sheila Ochugboju, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really fun discussion, and thank you everyone out there for joining us and asking such awesome questions. Please join us for BTI's next Breaking Ground discussion series on Wednesday, December 14th with Dr. Jacob Suissa, who is an NSF postdoctoral fellow in Fewi Leo's lab, and we're going to be talking about ferns. Everyone knows ferns because they're really cool and cute. So please join us for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you can go to btiscience.org for more information and to register. And I'm just going to paste a bunch of URLs into the chat box for you, so you can go there to register for Jacob's Breaking Ground. And you can also read more about BTI's current research and many other neat stories about BTI science in our annual report, which is online at btiscience.org/annual report. And our 2021 is out. It's all new and it's all digital with 3 different views. There's a single page view, 2-page view, which is most similar to seeing a hard copy, like reading a PDF kind of. And then there's also a reading view, which is really nice. It's kind of like reading news stories. It's more like an HTML type thing when you're like reading an online news story. And there are many links to videos and neat interactive aspects in the online report. So you can click right on to some cool videos and other things like that. And BTI is an independent nonprofit research institute, and we operate in large part thanks to the generosity of community members like you. If you'd like to make a gift to support BTI, you can donate online at btiscience.org/give or email our development team at development@btiscience.org. And thanks again, Sheila. Thanks again, everyone out there for joining us today. This was a lot of fun, and have a wonderful day and be well. Take care. Bye-bye.